What's up, guys? My name is Khan and we're back today with more Scrap Mechanic, and today we're just gonna jump right into it. This is just an awesome biplane. You guys saw in the title, it's got limited fuel. We've got 3 gauges. On the left, we've got our current throttle, which we can of course increase, we can decrease, and we can cut it if we want to. In the middle, we've got our airspeed, or just speed in general. And then on the right, we've got our fuel gauge, which is of course at full. So we're just going to decrease our throttle, bring it back down to 0. We're just going to turn on the plane. You know, I'll explain how all this works afterwards, but I'm sure you guys saw the title, you saw the thumbnail, and you're like, you know what? I just want to see what the heck he's talking about with this plane. So we press 1, and if you listen, you can kind of hear the engine has an idler. So it'll actually idle. And that kind of lets you know that your engine's on. So 1 is your ignition switch. 2 then increases our throttle. And of course, fuel consumption is 100% tied directly to how much throttle you're using. So the more throttle, the more fuel you consume. So we'll just increase that. And we'll use 5 and 6 here just to kind of, hopefully we have space here to take off. You know what? We need like a little over half throttle to really take off and fly here. So let's just idle out. Oh, too much. Oh, no, I went into the, oh, you know what? It worked. It's fine. We're up. Generally speaking, it flies just a little over half throttle is really the best sort of cruising altitude flight. Perfect. How are we, you know what, now we can go in first person. Look at that. Our gauge is 3/4 already. It's got a pretty decent tank. We're getting some weird sort of hitches. I'll explain why that happens in a bit. It's a beautiful plane though. I absolutely love it. I wanted to make a biplane. A lot of you guys in the last video, we did an exploding engine, and a lot of you commented, hey, you should really make an exploding engine that also has limited fuel. And then it got me thinking, well, I really should make a new limited fuel system that's really a lot better and is tied into the throttle of your vehicle. And then I thought, well, let's just put it in a biplane, because why not have a limited fuel plane? We are really cruising now. We can, you know, we can probably throttle back even a little bit more. I think we're just over half our tank is gone in our gasoline mixture here. Is that true? Yeah, just over half. We're still good though. We got a lot of fuel. I wanted to make this build really functional, so you can see we actually can fly for a fair amount of time. We started with a full tank, and we can fly for a fair amount of time before we have to refuel. And then of course, the fuel is just that little sort of white square panel there on the side of the plane. You just have to press it. So there's no way to press it while you're flying the plane. You just have to get out when you're landed and when you've run out of fuel. So we'll just keep flying here until we run out of fuel. You can see it cruises really nicely at a low throttle, and afterwards we'll crank it up to really high throttle, just so you can see there is a huge speed difference. But all we're doing really with the throttle is controlling the speed of the prop. We're just getting to the bottom of that fuel gauge there. So we should be, you know what, it's good. We'll just slow down here a little bit. We'll press 3, cut back our throttle, and look at this. We'll come in for a landing, and then I think 7 is our front brakes there. Perfect. And look at that. We actually just ran out of fuel. There's a few difficulties with this plane, which I want to explain. Mainly, if you look at the connection tool, it's just kind of a nightmare. And then, of course, we've got this whole sort of assembly here on the front of the plane, which you can actually see a lot better when we put it on the lift. So this is really the first time I tried to make a good single prop plane. And the one thing I noticed with single prop planes in Scrap Mechanic is the amount of torque that gets put off from this prop spinning in one direction is absolutely insane. It's such a huge amount of torque. So much so that we needed 4 invisible electric engines spinning in the opposite direction to counter the torque of the prop. So this is actually a 2-prop plane, except the second prop doesn't actually do anything but just spin a massive weight in the wrong direction. So the whole plane has a lot of metal in the back to kind of balance that out, and then the wings are kind of positioned, and it looks kind of weird on the lift, but of course when you're flying, that's all invisible and you don't see it. But sometimes that's why you get those weird jerking effects. The suspension is super stiff, but sometimes, you know, Scrap Mechanic and bearings and spinning objects and all that is kind of a problem. But that counterweight spins at the exact same speed as the prop, except opposite, and it provides enough gyroscopic force to counter the torque and give you a smooth flying experience with a single engine plane. Most of the time, I build planes with 2 engines, just because if you counterspin the 2 engines, it's so much easier to balance. So I spent way too long balancing that. And then, of course, we've got all this fuel system circuitry, which I do have laid out back where we started. So let's just fill this up, and then we'll head back over to the starting location. But before we fill it, we're just going to do a few things. Press 1 to turn it off, and then we're going to kill our throttle. I've had it too many times where you run out of fuel, and then you go to fill it, and the plane just shoots off. And yeah, it's a real problem. So we're just going to hold this button, and we can see there in the top left, the gauge is slowly going up. So I did make it that the fuel does take a little bit to fill, as well as have a lot longer of a life in air. So you can actually fly for a fair amount of time on one tank of fuel. And then of course, you can actually take your time to fill it up. So it's really, really nice. I know with the overheating engine, a lot of people said, hey, you made it overheat way too quickly. And that's true, and I will go back and make a better overheating engine. I was actually thinking of kind of combining the two circuits at some point. You can see the fuel circuit is a little bit excessive. Now, a bunch of this is plane controls as well, but it would be cool to have an overheating and fuel type system. But regardless, we've got it filled up again. So we're just gonna turn on our idler, and that's of course just a gas engine powering a bearing. Really simple stuff there. And I guess we can just throttle up. Are our brakes off? I think our brakes are off, right? Yeah, so that logic gate there right in the back, that's also where we've got that standing seat because you get kind of stuck in the cockpit and you can't get out, so you just look behind you to get out easier. But that lets you know if your brakes are on. There's front wheel brakes, which just kind of stops the front wheels from spinning if you want to keep your plane in one spot. Otherwise, it idles kind of forward. This does use a drag reducer block to kind of give it smoother flight. Plus, when you run out of fuel in midair, your prop will actually stop spinning. We use a smart engine to actually do all that. And what we're doing is cutting the power and the speed to the prop. So when all of a sudden we get to the point where we run out of fuel, the plane prop itself actually just kind of stop spinning and will counter spin with air. It becomes a free floating thing. So with the drag reducer block, it's really, really cool because the whole build then kind of becomes a glider, and it's pretty awesome, to be honest. But you can see we fly really, really smoothly. Again, just over half throttle there, but it's a really, really cool experience. And you can see the more you throttle up, the more the torque twists in the one direction a little bit compared to the other. It's a little bit weird. It's not a perfect balance, but it's pretty decent considering it only uses one engine. And of course, you can't see the fact that we're spinning a giant weight right in front of it, but it's a really, really awesome plane to fly. I absolutely love it. And we'll just throttle up here. So watch, we're at like, what, a little over half throttle? So this is full throttle. It's absolutely crazy. We can just hold it. And at full throttle, you can actually notice there's a huge speed difference, and we start getting the ability to really do some crazy stuff. This plane can, of course, fly vertical, no problem. And it's a great, great little stunt plane, but it does go really quick at full throttle. We're gonna fly this out. You can see right below us, oh, there we go. Right below us is where we wanna get to right there. So we're just gonna run out of fuel. Oh, we're almost out, okay. Let's loop back around here. When we run out, the engine will just kind of cut out, but it should free spin in the other direction. There it goes. That's the, it always makes a noise. And you can hear our idler's now off too. We'll just glide in here. So you can see with the drag reducer block, we actually get the ability to kind of glide more like a real plane rather than just fall from the sky. Although we kind of just, that was a really smooth landing. Instead of fueling this one up, we can actually just rip it apart, and we'll take a look at just the innards of this, just so you guys can see kind of how cool it is. It took a while to build it, actually, because I kind of compressed all the logic, and then we'll take a look at just how the fuel logic works, but it's really, really simple stuff. So we can just kind of rip this panel off. It gives you a really cool view when you look at the side of this, and you can really just see how it's all sort of set up. So at the back here, we don't really have much. We just have some metal counterweights. We've got the controls. All this logic back here, actually, there's 3 smart engines in a line, as well as a bunch of blocks here. This is actually just the plane controls I use for WSAD, for roll, pitch, and yaw, and all that. 2 buttons, all that stuff. And then when we move here, we get into some of the limited fuel stuff. This is actually your fuel tank back here. It's really just a number block. It stores how much fuel you've consumed, but it's just all back in here. And then when we get to the front, we get to a little bit more of the fun stuff. So we do have some wings here. You can see these kind of help give you some front lift to kind of help pull the front of your plane up. It helps one with takeoff a little bit, but mostly it helps you fly kind of consistent. I really had to add those when we added this giant metal brick on the front of it. I either had to move the wings really far forward, which then wouldn't really look proper. So then I kind of decided to add some of these instead. We got a 3-wide gas engine here as well, just to make that idler circuit. You can see we're literally just spinning a bearing with a small pipe piece on it, and that makes noise. And of course, that engine throttles up with our throttle as well. So when you turn it on, it has a little bit of a kind of idle, and then as you throttle up the engine, that actually gets louder and louder. It's not much, but I mean, you know what? It gives us a little bit of realism, I guess. And then we've really just got, you know, all the other buttons. I mean, we've got our throttle controls and stuff like that, and it's just all built into a 1-seater. And then, of course, our little dash, so when we take it off a lift, the dash kind of flips down. I really, really love this plane. It took a while for me to kind of get the dimensions right and just the way I liked it, but I really do love the way this plane looks, and I love the way this first-person kind of dash view looks. I know you can't see much out the front, but it's really cool that you can see your gauges as well as kind of off to the sides of both wings. But anyways, we're gonna take a look just how it all works. It's really a simple circuit. I know this looks like it's complicated, but it's really not. So you have a few things going on. You have a throttle here, right? And your throttle is this white value, and that determines how fast you're gonna spin the engine, right? So as we turn on the circuit, it just idles this. This is, you can pretty much ignore all this stuff here. This is just to turn on this gas engine. Really, that's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. That's all extra just to make the sound happen. You don't need any of that to make the fuel happen. So you know what? We're just gonna, we'll just remove all this. You don't need any of this. This is irrelevant. That's just for sound effects, okay? To make the fuel happen, we just need the rest of this stuff. So we've got, oh, we also broke the throttle gauge. Well, apparently I needed one of those. All right, so apparently I needed this stuff. But anyways, we've got a throttle gauge, we've got a throttle, and we've got a fuel gauge and all that. So first things first, the throttle. The throttle works really simply. It goes between 0.0 and 0.500. Your max throttle is 500. Now, we multiply that by a number to change it to RPM of the engine. So the throttle, the fact that the throttle is 500 is kind of irrelevant. I just picked 500. It could have been 100, could have been 50. It doesn't matter. But you can see when we hold this button, it throttles up. And really, the only reason I picked 500 is so it gives you a lot of variation. You can see we have to hold the throttle button for a long time before we get to full throttle, which is kind of nice. It gives you a lot of ability to play with how much. So you get a little bit above it, 502, but then it stops us from using that button. And then, of course, we can throttle down if we hit this brown button, and we can press white to completely reset the throttle to 0. So that's a pretty simple system. It's not really that complicated, and we can, of course, have our throttle, and you can see that actually spins our prop at different speeds. Now, the throttle we output to the gauge. As you hold it, it goes up, right? And as we bring it down, it goes down. Problem solved, simple stuff. The throttle value, we then feed through this kind of multiplication system here. So really what we're doing is we're feeding the throttle value and dividing it by the total value so we can convert it to a fraction. So we say 100 here, basically we're at 100 throttle, would be 100 over 500, so it'd be 0.2, and that's what we're feeding through. And then we feed 0.2 through these colored blocks, which in turn affect this black block here. It's actually counting up. Now, our fuel works on a weird system. The last time I did a fuel system, you had a value in your tank and you kind of drained that value, like a real car would do it, I guess. But in this case, we kind of do the opposite. Our tank is always full, and we're actually just telling it how much of the tank we've consumed. So this black number just keeps counting up and up and up until it gets to 100. The tank is at 100. And this keeps counting until it gets there. And once it gets to 100, it'll deactivate this block, which in turn will shut off all the systems, which will happen eventually. And then, of course, we have that whole thing hooked into another gauge system here, which you can see is depleting quite slowly. We're only at 100 throttle. If we crank this up, it'll start depleting faster, which is really cool. Again, it's kind of nice. It doesn't deplete too quick. It's nice that it takes a little bit of time. But you can see we can go up to 500 speed there, full throttle. And now we can actually visibly watch it does move a lot quicker than it did at a very small throttle. So it's a really cool system. The last time I did a limited fuel system, I'm not sure if it had a variable depletion rate. I don't think it did. I'm pretty sure it depleted all at the same speed, but I really like it. I think it's cool, and of course, I will upload this plane to the workshop. Not like this, though. So I think it's a pretty cool system. I think this system could be adopted into a lot of stuff. Oh, you can see it actually ran out of gas. So it's out of gas. This one, we can actually just reset with a single button. Fills the tank up instantly. With this plane, of course, made it so we have to hold a button to kind of fill the tank. You drain it in the opposite direction. But it is a really cool system. I'm really excited about it. Combining the limited fuel with the overheating engine, I think is going to be the next project. This logic is kind of large. But we can shrink it down a little bit more than I did. I made it a little bit excessive for this plane. There are a few things I can take out of that circuit and still get the same effect, but definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'm really excited about it. I love making these like semi-realistic things. I mean, this plane is nothing special, but the fact that you have to actually throttle it up and the fact that it actually consumes fuel is kind of cool. And you know, it just makes the experience so much cooler. I mean, we all can't wait for survival. We're gonna hit that tree. No, it's, okay. Can we get off the tree? No, okay. All right, let's try that again, shall we? Let's see if we can actually take off this time and not hit a tree. So let's just turn on our throttle. We don't really have much of a runway here, I think is part of the problem, but let's just throttle up and kind of use that back wheel. Of course, it does turn the back wheel to actually, you know, steer us. So once you've taken off and that back wheel doesn't have any traction, you're pretty much stuck with just the fin. You can see it kind of bounces sometimes too. But anyways, let's throttle up, get above half. All right, clear the tree, clear the tree. Perfect. All right, that was pretty smooth. Then we can throttle it down a little bit, just above half. It's a cool kind of mechanic that you can change how fast you fly at. This is really the best flying speed here. You can see where the throttle is. It is really, really cool though that you can change the throttle of your engine, which in turn changes your prop speed. And then of course that changes your fuel consumption. I really like that mechanic. I'd love to put this mechanic into a car as well, where as you change the throttle on your car, it also changes the speed. Combine that with, of course, the overheating engine, and you've got yourself a relatively realistic vehicle. But definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you think we should do with this kind of circuitry stuff? What do you think we should do with this engine? What other ideas? I mean, we've got limited fuel. We've got overheating. I don't really know what other things we can, I guess, make in a car. Like, what other things can we try and make semi-realistic with logic? I mean, obviously, we could do a semi-realistic gearbox, I guess. But other than that, I really don't know what else we can get into. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And while you're at it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We still have like a lot of fuel. We're not really consuming a lot of fuel here. I thought we were gonna be out of fuel by the time I was done that little outro. So let's just keep speeding up here. There we go, 3/4 throttle. That'll suck back the juice. Oh yeah, we're already at 1/4 fuel, perfect. But definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I love this plane. It's so cool. I'm so glad with the way it turned out. It took way too long, guys. I mean, the aesthetics is pretty simple, but just getting the balancing of that single engine with the torque took way too long, and I'm really excited that it worked out the way it did. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Definitely hit those buttons, and we're out of fuel. But as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time. This thing glides really well, though. Perfect.